Thank you for joining us again here at Get Ready News for another weekly show. I'm Mark Lindstead. This is my brother David Lindstead. And you might notice we're wearing the same clothes as last week. That's because we're recording a couple of these in advance. My brother's going to be working at a camp in Oklahoma, and then I'm going in for surgery. So we had to get a few of these in the can ready to release.
Yeah, we thought that would be the best way to do it, just at least to have a show for the next week and kind of let you know where we're standing and what we're thinking about. But if you'd be in prayer for us, for a successful camp and for a successful surgery.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with our channel, we like to look at things in the news, things that are going on in the world through the biblical lens. And we've tried to lighten it up a little bit and just have some fun with it. Because, I mean, when you look at what's going on in the world, how can you do anything but either be dreadful fear all the time or have to look back and laugh at some of the things that are happening?
Yeah, it gives me such comfort to know that God is in control.
Yeah.
In fact, we're doing our study at church in 2 Timothy 3.
Yeah.
And it talks about the perilous times that are coming.
Yeah.
But we can rest assured that even though these perilous times come, we can rest in God and Jesus Christ and His finished work on the cross.
Yeah. So we've got our YouTube pulled up here just so you can see that. There's a channel there. You'll see the image. It's called Get Ready News. If you'd like to subscribe to that, we'd appreciate it. It kind of helps get that videos going out further and further and further. But there are just some things today that I think require an address of some kind.
Yeah, I was watching the news this week, and this came up, and I watched this video. And so if you don't know, Macron and his wife seem to have had a spat.
Now Macron wants to be the leader of the entire globe, right?
He does. He thinks he's in the running for the UN.
In fact, he's even thinking about a UN military army,
yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
The thing is that you can have the UN, and yes, the UN has troops, but they're really on loan.
Yeah.
They're not really the UN's troops, even though they wear the blue helmets.
Now, if you've ever spent any time in any country that has a UN presence, like we have, especially in Israel, you'll know what UN really stands for. Because according to the Israeli people, the UN stands for United Nothing.
Yes.
They do absolutely nothing. They turn a blind eye to any Islamic attack, any Arab attack. But when Israel counterattacks or Israel fights back, then the UN starts to say, hey, you shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah. In fact, around the world, the UN almost has a problem with being a part of the problem.
Yeah.
More than they are a solution. They kind of treat their position as a high and lofty, and they ask for cuts of things.
Well, during the October 7th attack, they found out that at least 10% or more of the UN people at the relief workers area that were teachers,
yes,
were actually part of the October 7th attacks.
Isn't that amazing?
And then they used the UN building to house the hostages and to I'm sorry for this, but to rape them, to molest them, to beat them, to kill them, to torture them in a UN building.
Yeah, it's disgusting, and I think that Trump has every right what he's trying to do, and they actually called for the dissolving of that.
Yeah.
And I think Israel was pushing to get them claimed as terrorists.
Yeah.
Organization and all sorts of stuff. But it's amazing how we can take something that looks good.
Yeah.
And is called good.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely evil. It's actually given over to evilness.
That's pretty common, though. Nowadays,
Yeah.
The evil is good and the good is evil in media coverage, in many things.
Absolutely. That's twisted like crazy, even in America. America is almost upside down itself.
So what happened with this beloved leader?
So what happened was the airplane came and parked, if you will, and they were getting ready to get off, and they opened the door, and they must have opened the door a little bit too early. And the cameras caught Macron standing there, and all of a sudden these two hands came and smacked him in the mouth and pushed him away, and he looked over and he realized that this is not something that they should have seen, and so he started to smile and try to make light of it. And so I think the official statement was they were roughhousing or playing around.
Yeah, we were play fighting. Married couples shove each other in the face all the time. It just happens.
I was watching a video with a guy that's a body language professor, if you will. And I don't know how much I buy into that stuff all the time, but he says, normally when a husband and wife are playing around like that, they would push in the chest or they would bump with the arm or something like that. They wouldn't put two hands in the face and shove.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm curious now. I want to see some interviews of the staff on these flights. I want to know what else happens on these flights.
It's kind of funny. There was one lady that was outside the airplane when they opened the door, and she saw that happen, and she looked away real quick, and so something was going on. Now, the other thing that's interesting is when they started to descend the staircase.
Yeah.
Macron held out his arm to help her down the staircase. Now, a lot of people don't know this, and I didn't know this until just recently. They met as a couple when he was 15.
Oh, wow.
And she was 39. In fact, she was one of his teachers.
So she belongs in prison.
She belongs in prison. And
Wow.
So there is a huge disparity in age here, and she is quite old. So he held out his arm to help her down the stairs, and she wouldn't even begin to take it.
Well, I can tell you right now, if you're playing around roughhousing with your wife, and it really is playful fun, she's not going to refuse your arm coming down the stairs. So I would say that I doubt that was playful fun.
Now, I don't. I think there's something going on in the back. She's probably at the age now. She's probably in her 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if she's not having some mental issues.
Sure.
Or there could be something going on between them. He's young enough. He may be talking to other women.
Yeah.
That kind of makes her mad.
Wow. What a situation. And to think that if he doesn't have his own home in order, how's he going to put the world in order?
Yeah. How can he lead a nation?
Yeah, and this goes right back to what we talked about last week about deception in the media and how he's this powerful figure and he's going to right the wrongs and he's going to control the UN and he's going to have an army to go in and fight justly. And I'm curious as who's going to actually be pulling the strings.
Yeah.
Is he a puppet like Joe Biden was?
And that's a good question. I've always kind of thought that most leaders were their own leaders, but here we had in the UK. The UK's been taken over mainly by Muslims.
Yeah.
And I've seen leaders with Muslims standing behind them saying things that they normally wouldn't say.
Yeah.
And I think that most of the leaders we see anymore are just kind of puppet leaders. I think they're just there for eye candy.
Yeah, well, we're from Kansas. I think about the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yeah.
It's me you need to worry about.
We talk about a deep state, and I think there's a deep state world government version, and just the direction everything's going, and we used to say, as the America catches a cold, everybody else sneezes.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I think that we're all tied together by this deep state.
Sure. Well, and you look at just recently in our own American government on the House, I think it was the House floor, it was in Congress, we'll just call it that. There's a proposal by a senator to form a shadow government.
Oh, yeah.
He says, if they have a head of the FAA, we need a head of the FAA to fight directly against them all the time. And if they have a head of FDA, we need to have a head of FDA to fight against them. And he literally wants to and he called it on the floor, we want a shadow government.
Yeah, and I think that you get into, in order to have an effective puppet, you have to have somebody that doesn't know anything.
Yeah.
And I think that we see the dumbness sometimes of these people that are in power.
Yeah, well, if you listen to some of the answers these politicians give when they're in a live forum, and the answer just goes like this.
Yeah.
Circular.
And 9 times out of 10, they don't even answer the question. And we saw last week with the news editing Kamala's answer so it looked coherent.
Yeah.
And so you don't even know what's going on every place else.
It's such a scam. But you're right. The puppet has to be somewhat oblivious to what's really going on. And I think that you end up with people who are above normal wealth
Yeah.
because they don't have to deal with the daily things. I feel like Trump is a little bit of an exception to that because he had to earn his wealth. Now, I know. He got $1 million loan from his dad. Okay, you tell me anyone else you know that got $1 million loan and became a billionaire from it.
Yeah.
Because he still had to work from the ground up in the industry he was in. It was not, oh, by the way, I'm going to make you CEO of my multi-billion-dollar company and just give it to you. No, here's some money. Start your work. Let's see what you can do with it.
Yeah, and I think that this is a way for us to see this problem would be what I call actors and actresses with their kids.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you may have an older actor or actress that worked their way up from nothing, and well, now their kids are affluent.
Yeah.
And these people have no clue about what the world really is.
Yeah.
They have no need, they have no want, they have no desire to do anything.
They have no idea what it's like to have $1,000 in the bank,
Yep.
and rent is due as well as groceries.
Yep.
And you have to decide, do I go late to the landlord and feed my family, or do I pay the landlord on time and find another way to feed my family?
Yeah.
It's totally different ballgame, and it's amazing to see the disconnect. And this is the problem with having no term limits.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
It's crazy because you look at what's going on here, and you see people in office like Pelosi and I'm thinking of who's some of the Republican ones. What's his name? Mitch McConnell.
Mitch McConnell. Yeah.
And I see corruption in anyone who holds power for that long.
Yeah, it used to be that you would go and serve for 5 or 6 years, and you weren't there every day either.
Yeah.
And then you would relinquish, and the next person would go and serve, and now it's become a career.
Yeah. Well, you look at the way it was intended. Public service was actually usually paid less than your regular job.
Yeah.
And people went in to serve the
Yeah.
people. And they only did it for for 1 or 2 terms at most because, okay, now I got to go back and make money. Otherwise my family isn't going to survive. To where now it's how much money can I grab while I'm here and how long can I stay in office?
I think if you look at AOC,
Yeah.
that you will see this for sure.
Yeah.
She was a bartender with a degree that means nothing.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden she was put into Congress or whatever, and by 12,000 people.
Yep.
So she made it there off of 12,000 votes. And she got into office, and now she's worth millions of dollars.
Yep.
Now, how did that happen when her... I think their take home's like 125,000
174.
174,000. How did she become a multi-millionaire?
Yeah.
By taking that salary for the last 5-6 years.
And unfortunately, even in her short career, they found deception and what do you call it, corruption when she paid her boyfriend money or whatever. And it's just ridiculous. I thought I would never see America this big of a circus.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is. I'm astounded at that. And what was I think there was a quote from one of the founding fathers that said something about, show me a man who gets rich in government and I'll show you corruption at its heart. And it was never intended to be an affluent position. It was a position of servant. That's why they call them public servants.
Yeah, and I think Elon, with his being part of Doge and with his AI searches, has really pulled a lot of corruption out in how they were paying themselves. They would start nonprofit organizations, allocate money to it, and then that company would disseminate money to whomever, and it was just amazing.
Well, and Elon's one of those that came from nothing.
Yeah.
He's the richest man in the world now, I think. I don't know if he could. Maybe some of those Saudi sheiks with the oil might be.
Yeah, I think he's up there.
But he can't. He understands that type of thing, and he's really against wasteful spending.
Yeah,
I enjoy seeing that in him.
And I'm all for it. People complain about Elon being there, but he's not in our government.
Yeah.
They say, well, he's doing a job that he's never done. And it's like, well, no, you don't understand. He wrote the program
Yeah.
that searches out corruption, so he's there for the program.
Yeah.
And another thing that I find interesting, and I'm, as much as I like Trump and I think that he's doing things that are correct and whatnot, I'm not in the bag for Trump.
Yeah.
But he's the only politician that we've had that's lost value, net value, by
Yeah.
being in office. So
Yeah.
when he was in office the first time, his value actually went down.
By $1 billion.
Yes. And it's because he wasn't doing business.
Yep.
And he doesn't take a salary from the government. He sends
donates
that to
everything.
charity,
Yeah.
and it's just amazing.
And I just want to be clear what $1 billion
Oh,
is
yeah.
here. I mean, you look at, okay, let's say you got $1 million. Let's put that into seconds. 1 million seconds is, I think, just short of 12 days or just longer than 12 days. 1 billion seconds is 32,000 years.
Yeah.
I mean, just contemplate that for a moment. And he lost that in taking the office. That's what the servant looks like.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy. And we see so much going on in the world, this deception and whatnot. But it's not just in the secular world. It's happening in the religious world.
Yeah.
And I've got a place I like to go view a few things. Now, I'm not going to say that they're the best ever place to get information. Don't think that I'm saying this Protestia website is all truthful. It is the only place that you can see truth, but you see many articles from them where they call out not only Catholicism, they call out evangelicals,
Yep.
they call out Protestants, they call out Presbyterians. There is no safe place if you're blaspheming God.
Yes.
And we see here Andy Stanley's church is sending children to all LGBTQ therapists. We profile one of their gender fluid counselors. I mean, Andy Stanley was a name for a long time.
You know, the
Someone
bad thing
to
is,
listen to.
Charles Stanley, his father, was a pretty good guy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until his last years on this earth that he joined with his son, and his son brought him down.
Now, let me ask you, is it a Joe Biden situation?
You know, that's a good question, because, you know, I've had the opportunity to be under a pastor who was in his 90s.
Yeah.
And an assistant pastor that was in his 50s. And the gentleman that was in his 90s, you could tell had lost his edge.
Yeah.
And he was just saying cliches and just get up there to say things, and he could fill time because he had the gift of gab.
Yep. Yep.
But he really didn't have a message versus the one in his 50s who had a message. And I think that this could be the case with Charles Stanley, is he got to the point where he could still stand up and look like he was there, and now his son comes in and he's putting his faith in his son.
Yeah.
And his son's driving him off the cliff.
Yeah.
Because Andy Stanley stands for some absolute horrific things.
It's really disgusting to see him bringing perversion into the church.
Yep.
Him bringing reaffirming of sin into the church. I mean, now this is going to sound over the top. Where do you draw the line? When are we going to start reaffirming murder? I mean, some already do in the form of abortion.
Yes.
But what about actual murder? Well, I can see why you did that. They kind of made you mad.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much going on, and it's really just a strange place that we find people claiming to be the church.
Yeah, I think one of the ones that just stand out in my mind right now is the guy that held church in a bar.
Yeah.
And it was like, you know, I'm all for reaching those people that go to the bar.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would go into the bar
Sure.
to reach them.
Christ ate with publicans and sinners. He dealt with prostitutes. He dealt with drunkards. He dealt with all these things. If you read the biblical account, you'll not find him in a bar,
Nope.
in a brothel,
Nope.
in a house of ill repute of any kind, a gambling house. He'll deal with the people,
Yes.
but he will not come into their den of sin.
And I think that's the example he set is the example we follow.
Yeah.
We can reach these people. If you want to stand on the corner and preach, I'm good with you standing on the
Yeah.
corner and preaching. I'm good with, but you don't go into their place and sit down and have a beer with them. Now, I don't have an issue. People want to say, well, should Christians drink or not? That's a liberty thing. That's
Yeah.
something that I leave up to you and your own conviction. But you shouldn't be in a bar,
Yeah.
and you shouldn't bring the church into the bar.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with you on the alcohol. It's a liberty thing. I think that biblically, when it really calls it out is when you've altered your mind state by becoming drunk.
Yeah.
I think that's an issue. But as far as the consumption of alcohol is a thing, we have liberty in Christ to do those things. Is it profitable? Is it edifying?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But right now, what I'm just focused on this. Christ didn't go there. Now we look at this one here. We get this Dr. Lance Wanalu is just using an honorary degree. That's interesting, though. Is an honorary degree from a creditable university a degree?
That's a fantastic question, because I think that depends on the facility that issues the degree.
That's right.
And who the person is that receives that degree and what their standing is.
Now, if you go in there to dupeuniversity.com or whatever it is and pay $10 for an honorary degree, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't know where his honorary degree was issued from, but I would say, let's say, if Wichita State University, we live in Wichita, if Wichita State University gave somebody an honorary doctorate degree in their field, I would say that they did the due diligence to say this person has the knowledge to have bestowed upon them the title of doctorate or PhD in their field.
Well, the thing that it comes down to is this also. College, university, is not the epicenter of all knowledge.
Yeah.
And somebody who is self-studied can be as smart as somebody who went to a college.
Yeah.
And for us to say, well, in order for you to live in the society and be useful, you have to have college, you have to have a degree, you have to have all this stuff. But, if somebody were, let's say, and I have issues with MacArthur, but I still respect MacArthur because I think he's pretty on point on most things. There's a couple of things I would probably argue with, but if the Masters University looked at a Bible teacher and said, that man knows what he's doing and he is so knowledgeable, and gave him an honorary doctorate, I think I would respect that.
Yeah, yeah. What about this one? Show inside cathedral featured raw chickens and diapers, and the German president was in attendance of this. And this is a spoof on a show, the Westphalia Side Story, and the song was "Meat is Meat."
Oh my goodness!
And where are we in the world today that this is happening in active church? Now, I understand there are some churches that are empty. People have bought them, turned them into bars, turned them into dance halls, turned them into whatever else. But this is an active Catholic church that is allowing raw chickens and shirtless men to sing songs about meat is meat and the whole, what in the world is going on?
Well, you look at that, and then you open up your app to TikTok, and I see site after site of women priests and women clergy.
Yeah.
And I've even watched site after site of those using profanity.
Yeah.
And as nude as you can get.
Yep.
And it's like, where are we at?
I remember one guy, I don't remember what church he was at, but he was wearing a robe, so I'm assuming he's some type of doxy.
Right, right.
And his sash was a rainbow. And he starts out by saying, God is gay.
Yeah.
God is lesbian. God is homosexual. God is cis. God is trans.
Yep.
God is able-bodied and disabled. God is, and he just goes on and on and on and on about this whole list. And that's a lie from the pit of hell.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
God is none of those things. God is God.
Yeah.
period.
Yep.
There's no trans about him. It's not modalism. It's not one God showing up in 3 different times at 3 different ways. He's a triune God.
Yes.
And it just, the sickening things that are being done in the face of God in the form of religion.
Yeah, it's I think it's in John 4. The Samaritan woman comes
Yeah.
to the well, and Jesus talks to her, and she says, well, is it okay that we worship here and not in Jerusalem? And Jesus says, in both places you guys worship what you know not.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter where you're at. You guys don't even know what you're worshiping. You're just going through the motions.
Yeah.
But there's going to come a time where you're not going to do that, and you're going to worship God in truth and in spirit.
Yeah. Yeah.
The problem is that there is no truth
Yeah.
outside of the Bible, and these people have no
Yeah.
earthly idea of what is actually true, and then what is spirit. What
Yeah.
God is a spirit. He is not these things that they're describing.
Yeah. Well, and I start to come to the conclusion and understanding that people don't really understand what the church is for.
Oh yeah, I agree.
In the way that we have our congregation here is the first meeting on the Sunday is a remembrance meeting, and we break the bread, we drink the juice, and we spend the entire hour focusing on the person of Christ.
Yep.
And who he is. And it's dedicated solely to that.
Yep.
And then after that, we do have a corporate meeting where we have children go to Sunday school, adults stay for what they call Family Bible Hour, and we teach from the Bible, exegesis. We teach what the Bible says to edify the body.
Yep.
And that's where you come into fellowship with each other and build each other up and strengthen each other as the body of Christ, as the true universal church, not the Roman Catholic Church.
Now, the other catchword in there is fellowship, and people seem to think that eating donuts and drinking coffee is fellowship, and it is. It's a form of fellowship.
Yeah.
But our fellowship is on a spiritual level. It centers around Christ. It centers around God, and it's to build each other up for the work that God has given us.
Well, I hope that you'll keep focused on the truth, the real truth, which is Jesus Christ. And I hope you've made him your Savior and that you're going to spend an eternity with us and with Jesus. Thanks for joining us this week. We'll see you next week.